so. But I'd like to start with a couple of Bible verses relevant to today. From the International Version, Matthew 28, 5 through 8. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here, he has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he's risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the woman hurried away from the tomb, afraid, yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. And here's the same verses from the First Nations Version, an indigenous translation of the New Testament, which I didn't know existed, but is very, very cool. "Do not fear," the Spirit messenger said to the women. "The one you are looking for is not here. Creator sets free," which is their name for Jesus, "who was killed on the cross, has come back to life again, just as he said. Look, here is where they laid him. Now hurry and go tell his followers that he has risen from the dead. Tell them he is going ahead of them to Circle of Nations," which is what they called Galilee, "and they will see him there. Now remember what I've told you." Let us pray. Father, Mother God, we are grateful to be living in a time with so much potential. We are grateful for your constant and loving presence in our lives. We ask now that our guides, angels, and loved ones in spirit gather close as we celebrate that by repeating the prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And we have a special song this morning for the sermon song. How many of you grew up watching Bugs Bunny cartoons? And you remember he had several where he, for whatever contrived reason, was conducting an orchestra or chorus, and he would just point and the music would happen. And that's kind of how I felt up here while that was playing. I was like, just bring this in, bring that on. Okay, so. Sorry, a little brain fart there. Good morning and welcome to USCL Church, a very special Easter morning. Frequently the topic for discussion in the spiritual church on an Easter Sunday is reviving the Christ spirit in each of us, as Jesus demonstrated so beautifully. But that's a topic that's been covered here before, several times, and by much better speakers than I. In fact, Reverend Rose covered the topic beautifully just last week, and that recording is available on YouTube if you would like to watch it. So Easter is actually kind of a strange holiday for a spiritualist church. It's one where the average Christian church celebrates the fact that Jesus didn't die, which is indeed a wonderful thing to celebrate. But each Sunday here, we celebrate that our ancestors and loved ones didn't die either. Their passing may have been not quite as spectacular as Jesus was, and their continuing existence is a little bit different than Jesus. Still, we celebrate what they have in common, and that's that they continue to live, and we continue to communicate with them. And we can celebrate their lives in the present and not in the past. I remember attending sunrise services at our church as a child and celebrating the special thought that Jesus is alive, and what a wonderful thought that was. And I love that each and every Sunday here, we celebrate the fact that our loved ones are still alive as well. Of course, we understand that Jesus' life and his death was magnitudes different than those that our loved ones and ancestors have lived. But I love that we can celebrate the lives of our loved ones every Sunday. And I love that we can still communicate with them. In most churches, they just say prayers to Jesus and hope he's listening. And we actually speak with our ancestors. It's a two-way communication. And if that's not a miracle, well, I don't know what is. So we're going to talk about death on this significant morning. And I know that may sound a little bit creepy, but we're only going to talk about the relationship between death and food, which may sound even creepier. Food is used, if not celebrate, to at least commemorate and honor our loved ones' deaths. And it's interesting to me how we use food to mark special occasions. Birthdays, weddings, holidays in our culture all seem to have their own special food items. Funerals are no different, as they're special occasions as well, where we can celebrate what a particular person has meant to us. I found this fascinating book, me and my books, those of you who know me and my books, called Dying to Eat. And it's got some really great information in it about other people's relationship to food and death. So I'm going to share some of that on this morning. One thing I learned from the book is that the definition of death is not universal. Some cultures see it as a process, and others as a single moment. And some cultures, even that view it as a single moment, view cardiopulmonary failure as death, and others use brain death as their standard. Similarly, foods and meals are by any means universal. The preparation of food is also important, as cooking is transformational, if you think about it. It is what turns food from mere sustenance into communal and societal rituals. The act of preparing food, followed by the act of consuming it, is similar to the way death decays our bodies. And I'm not going to repeat that because that's kind of a creepy thought too. We prepare dead bodies for public consumption. Some cultures wash and purify the remains, some embalm or cremate them. This prepares bodies to participate as corpses in public and social rituals of bereavement and loss. In a similar fashion, we transform food into meals, preparing and altering food in the kitchen, changing raw materials into a meaningful meal. Cooking and corpses are both part of social rituals in which we come together and think about life and death. In that way, food is used as a mediating agent between heaven on earth and between life and death. In recent years, popular literature and social media regarding food and death have placed food and death at center stage, as famous chefs published books and stories about their favorite meals. Books such as the recent bestseller My Last Supper, which details what these famous chefs and celebrities would choose for their final meals. Food is presented in these cases as nourishing not only in substance, but in feeling, and as a tie, and as a ceremonial thing. Food is a central actor in funeral feasts, bereavement rituals, and memorialization practices. It remains an enduring and often overlooked part of the material world of grief. Food has played a major role in funerary and ritualized funerary practices since the beginning of mankind. These are kind of neat stories. So, in the ancient Roman world, it was common practice to build tubes connecting the tops of the graves with the crypts themselves. Mourners would regularly pour food through the tube, which was then placed in the mouth of the corpse. It was in order to feed the dead while they waited for their afterlife. Early Christian mourners, remembering and honoring the dead, regularly feasted at graves, and it was common for cemeteries to contain kitchens to aid in the preparation of the food for the graveside feasts that fed the dead while they waited for resurrection. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Christians in Great Britain commonly placed bread or cake on the corpse to absorb the sins of the deceased. Some families even hired official sin eaters who in exchange for a small amount of money would eat the sins of their dead to expunge them. These corpse cakes were gradually replaced by the popular and communally shared funeral biscuits of the Victorian era. These were wrapped with printed prayers and poems meant to comfort gathered mourners rather than to intercede on behalf of the dead. In Viking culture, because you know they knew how to live, funeral ale was consumed on the 7th day following the death to mark the passing of the deceased, and the heirs of the deceased were then ritually and formally recognized. Similarly, in the Hindu Brahmin culture, 16 rice balls were continually offered every day over 12 days to ensure that the soul of the departed reached its destination. In China, Japan, and Korea, it's customary to offer food not only to the bereaved, but to the deceased. Ritualistic foods are prepared and served at particular times in order to remember and feed the dead. Food and drink sustain us in life, why not in death as well? One 12th century Chinese scholar explains the relationship between living people and their ancestors as the continuation of the same qi, which is spelled Qi, or cosmic force. The Chinese definition of qi is that it's shared substance of the universe. It is concretely physical, even in the states that are not humanly tangible. Contrary to the popular and especially Western misunderstanding that qi is an energetic, metaphysical, or even purely theoretical thing, to the Chinese, qi is something physical, whether you can see it or feel it or not. In this classical Chinese worldview, qi is the basic makeup of the world. From things with form, such as solid, liquid, or gas, to things without form, such as natural phenomenon and spirits and even thoughts, all those things are made of qi. The blood relationship between the ancestor and the descendants creates an emotional vibration between the two because of the shared qi. What this means is that there's always a physical connection to the ancestor. The description of ancestral bones being filled with qi is not meant to be symbolic or poetic. In the Chinese tradition, it's imperative to properly maintain and sustain the bones of the ancestors. The bones, as the physical remains of the ancestors, continue to be connected to the descendants. Furthermore, if they're properly buried in the earth, the vibrancy of the life force in nature helps sustain the descendants. This is the foundational reason for the increasing and unceasing popularity of feng shui in the Chinese culture. Whereas feng shui is currently understood outside the Chinese community as home decluttering or aesthetic furniture arrangements, it was at first a set of strategies for finding the best location for burial. The terms feng, which is wind, and shui, which is water, indicate the goal of finding sites that have ideal airflow and moisture level for the storage of ancestral bones. Proper burial and maintenance of ancestral bones are so important that the practice of reburial is still common in Chinese communities. The practice of bone picking and professional bone picking managers can be found in southern coastal provinces of China and Taiwan. They continued through Chinese diasporas into Malaysia and Singapore. And in North American Chinese communities, reburial entails shipping the picked bones back to the ancestral home of the deceased in China, so the body can be reunited with the rest of the clan ancestors. In communities where reburial is practiced, the body is exhumed 5 to 10 years after the first burial. An auspicious day is selected, one whose astrological alignment is suitable for the deceased. The coffin is reopened, and the bone-picking master inspects the remains. The ideal condition is achieved when the flesh has decomposed completely and cleanly, leaving only bones that are easily picked up to be placed in the bone urn. This is why the feng shui of the burial site is so important. If the burial site is too dry, the body can mummify and not separate from the bones. If the burial site is too wet, it just decays and clings to the bones. And finally, bones can be damaged or lost at sites that are subject to the intrusion of plant roots and animals, and the incomplete skeletal body can have detrimental effects on the rest of the living family. So properly stored ancestral bones serve as an essential basis for the continuing connection between the deceased and their descendants. The energetic quality of the bones has direct effects on the well-beings of the descendants. This connection must be frequently reinforced using proper ritual, some of which include offering fragrant wine for libation to call forth the souls of the ancestors. The offering of food and wine is essential to the process of conjuring the spirits of the ancestors for the purpose of becoming one with their descendants. Read into that what you will. These worshipful rituals can be performed at grave sites, at clan shrines, in temples, and at home. The offerings at the clan shrines are similar to gravesite offerings because the clan shrine is another location where the ancestral spirits can be conjured to congregate. I kind of like that phrase in that image, conjured to congregate. In Korea, it's common to prepare and serve food in veneration ceremonies for ancestors. All participants, in most cases descendants of the dead ancestors, then eat the food together during or after the worship. The major religions in Korea tend to include some element of eating in their rituals. For example, during Confucian rites for ancestor veneration, one of the male elders drinks rice wine as a part of the ritual. In the shamanic ritual, the shaman, as the embodied spirit, drinks rice wine and shares it with all the participants. In Christianity, the primary eating ritual centers on the Eucharist, one of the most crucial parts of the Mass in a Catholic church. And the Eucharist recalls the death of Jesus as well as his resurrection by reenacting Jesus' final dinner with his disciples. This is the moment of eating the bread and drinking the wine. The past and the future become one moment in the present. By consuming the bread, Catholics believe they are consumed into the body of Christ. And it's common for Korean Catholics to celebrate Mass almost every day for the remembrance of the souls of each family. In the U.S., funeral food is a way to remember the dead by bringing together the community and using cherished recipes that have been handed down through the generations. Particularly in the southern U.S., funeral dishes are usually casseroles or dishes meant to serve a large quantity of people. Usually there tend to be a lot of cakes and pies served at these meals, and they serve as showcases of heritage recipes. Funeral food generally functions as a support service to those who are mourning. In China, food plays a prominent role in both the funeral ceremonies for the deceased and again afterward in the remembrances of the dead. When a person dies, a wake is often held before interment, and the family and friends sit with the body for days between death and burial in order to deter any evil spirits and to help guide the deceased in his or her journey in the afterlife. Until the burial, the family is expected to maintain a vegetarian diet to honor the deceased. In addition to keeping a simple lifestyle in dress and activity. In China, meat was traditionally considered a luxury item that connoted status, and even today it's generally expected that the family and close relatives of the deceased refrain from eating meat following a death. In more ancient times, this practice allowed the family to put its money toward the expenses of purchasing meat for the funeral. And following the funeral, families continue to make food offerings at the grave site or the ancestral table located in the home, or both, on the anniversary date of the death. This is also done at the Chinese New Year and again at the annual Qingming Festival, a sort of Chinese Memorial Day. When all these food and wine offerings are made at the site of the grave is swept clean and tended. Wine is poured into cups and left on the tombstones, and food is offered and then consumed by the family and relatives. on behalf of and with the dead. The individual gravesite thus becomes transformed into a social space through the act of eating. Jews and food are intimately connected. The old joke that almost any Jewish holiday can be summarized as, "They tried to kill us, we won, let's eat." Perhaps one of Judaism's unique contributions is the combination of religious law and eating, called kamut, or keeping kosher. Kosher is a word that translates as acceptable. Therefore, food that is acceptable is kosher food. Whereas food that is not acceptable is tres, which is a Yiddish word meaning not kosher. The laws of kosher or not kosher come from two basic sources: the Torah, or the books of Moses that make up the first part of the Hebrew Bible, or the Talmud. The Torah is referred to as the written law, while the Talmud is considered rabbinical or oral law. Muslims firmly believe that human beings have one life to live in joy and worship the Creator God, all before transitioning to the hereafter. Muslims also perceive death as a bridge to the final destination, where the final destination is Judgment Day, when one is led to either paradise or hell based on one's deeds on earth. Funeral food served following the burial of a Muslim represents respect, honor, and relief as the deceased moves from the physical world to the spiritual one. In the spiritual world, he or she faces judgment that's based on deeds rather than wealth, social status, or ownership of property or earthly goods. Thus, the food served after burial holds special meaning because it reflects human morality and divine judgment rather than worldly successes. Each Muslim country follows its own traditions and rituals related to the food it serves following a burial. In Morocco, the funeral meal traditionally consists of honey, butter, and bread. Though honey is naturally sweet, it does not represent any particular aspect when it comes to either the funeral procedure or the deceased. In China, in contrast, mourners offer candies in the symbolic effort to sweeten the event. Equally important funeral rites in Morocco, or the Muslim world for that matter, reflect the status of the deceased. Regardless of whether the deceased was wealthy or well-educated or a common person, he or she is given the same burial administered to all Muslims, regardless of their social status. So I suspect there's a lot more than any of you ever really wanted to know about food and death, but I did find it fascinating and wanted to share. It kind of gave me a new perspective on what is the sacredness of food. It made me look differently and gives us all the chance to celebrate every meal, whether alone or with others. So after the service, there is some food available for those who would like to share a few sacred minutes with this wonderful group of people. So thank you for listening. And during the meditation, I thought we'd take a few minutes to consider how what we eat ties us to this physical body, and how we might recognize that tie and appreciate it. So before we begin, I'd like you to think about an item of food and a type of food that you really like, that's very special to you and brings special meaning to you. So with that in mind, we'll go into the meditation. As we join together, you can cut the music, Charlie. As we join together to learn, grow, and heal, we prepare ourselves by getting comfortable in our seats and gently closing our eyes, knowing we're protected and all is well. Our bodies relax into the seats, and we allow ourselves to feel fully supported. And we begin by concentrating on our breathing. Take at least 3 slow, deep breaths and feel your breath as it goes in and out. Breathe in peace, hold it a moment or two, and then let go of whatever stresses you might be carrying. And as you do, imagine all the strains and worries and tension you've been feeling. Just leave your body through your breath. When thoughts pop up in your mind, just let them go with your breath as you continue to just feel your breathing. Just allow your breath to follow its own natural rhythm, in and out. As your mind becomes still, settling into peace and quiet with the gentle rhythm of your breathing. You feel calm and at peace, and your thoughts slow as your mind begins to relax and open. And knowing that you are in a protected place right now, surrounded by all that is loving and sacred. Sacred is such a powerful word. Sacred. There is strength in sacred. There is power in sacred. And while you are considering sacred, bring the thought of the food that you enjoy into your mind and think sacred. Realize how much power there is in the food you eat. And realize that it is indeed sacred. And just sit for a moment with that thought of your favorite food and the word sacred. And know that every meal from now forward can bring that energy of sacred into your body. And it's time now for you to return your attention to the here and now. You're becoming more aware of your body again. Take a deep breath in and out to remind you of your body and how it feels. Another deep breath and out. And on the third one, you can allow your eyes to open and join us here and now.